Welcome back. We are here again with Diana, who is part of LAK Group's executive recruiting business, Spano Pratt. And we are talking today about that candidate who thinks that they're the ideal candidate and yet can't seem to land the job, right? And I think my resume looks good, and I submitted my resume and my application, and I never hear back, or I keep getting the rejection letters. And so, Diana, you're going to kind of go through with us today and give us your expert lens on, okay, yep, I see what you're talking about here. But let me tell you why you are or you're not the perfect candidate for this role based on what I see in your resume. As we get started with that, I've got a resume up here. We're going to bounce back and forth between a couple resumes here. One that is a good resume, and this is what I'm showing here, and then one that's a not so good resume, so you can kind of compare and contrast. And you're going to be it's funny, before we started talking, we were talking about sports and professional sports, and you brought up the idea of being an analyst, and you're kind of that analyst here. You're breaking down the play, I guess, here, for all of us watching to be able to see from your lens, why will this individual get a call back versus the other resume that we're going to look for? But before we even get into that, just maybe tell us, what are some likely reasons why the perfect candidate, right?
Yes.
In their mind, and in our mind too, on the career coaching side, look and say, yeah, they really are a good candidate. Why are they getting looked over for jobs that they're applying for online?
That's a great question, Andy. Let me start with some of the kind of general things, and then we'll dive into the specific resumes. One thing, and this is just a kind of a byproduct of the workload of the recruiter, sometimes they just get overlooked. I mean, we are processing through so many resumes, depending on the position. And sometimes, we're not perfect and the ball just truly gets dropped. The other thing could be that by the time the perfect candidate hears about the job already has been up for maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks. And maybe the recruiter and the hiring manager have already kind of moved forward in the process to the point that they're not inviting other candidates in. So again, could have been the right person, but just the timing was off.
Wrong time, yeah.
The other thing can be that, maybe it's posted as an HR job, like this one is right here, an HR professional. And maybe, the person the ideal candidate hasn't really read the job description. And the job description says, it's all about employee relations. And this person maybe is all about payroll and benefits. So as a recruiter, when I know, hey, the hiring manager wants employee relations, if that's not one of the first 2 or 3 things that I see on the resume, even if they've got this huge HR background, if it's all in payroll and benefits, I'm not going to immediately see how that's going to fit. So it could be, just really taking the time to look through what it is, not just HR, but the specific part of HR or whatever entity or field it is, really understanding the nuances that they're looking for. And it's okay to rewrite your resume 10 different times and focus what that company is looking for and make sure it's there in the resume. I mean, that's what's going to pull me in is if I see exactly what I've posted in the job post on your resume. So feel free to have multiple resume versions that really tailor your skills to what the job is that you're applying for.
Yeah. And based on what you just said, really take the time to read the resume or the job description too, right? And really digest it of what is it saying, what is it asking for, right? Because I've been guilty of this too. You read it really quickly, you think, yeah, that sounds good, but you miss some finer details. So it's almost like a meditation kind of moment of like sit with that job description, really take some time to understand what it's asking for.
Yeah, is the company of interest to you? Like,
Hmm.
maybe it's like you and I think would love like a sports marketing kind of company. That would be right up our alley. But for someone else, the thought of having to deal with sports and statistics and that's just not their thing. And same thing, maybe it's someone who really loves science. Try to find things that you're truly interested in. There's jobs out there. So try to match up your interest level. and the culture of the company. I know, Andy, we've talked about this in the past, but it's so important. Do your homework. Try to figure out, is it a family-owned company? Is it, a giant Fortune 500 company? Is it somewhere in the middle? What's going to really work best for you as a person? And then in this day and age, we have often a remote or a hybrid option, but maybe it's a company who is very much an on-site place. Before you apply, make sure that whatever that is works in your life as well.
Excellent. Good advice. So, um, let's now say all of that. You've taken the time, you've really looked over the job description, you understand the company, understand what they're looking for. You've put together your resume, you submitted your application. Timing was right, you caught it early, all of those kind of things. And now you're sitting here and you're like, I'm not hearing, or you get the rejection letter or the thanks for applying, but we're going in a different direction kind of note. Do we want to look at the resumes, Diana, or do you have thoughts in terms of what else might be going on there?
Let me share a couple other things.
Okay.
We talked a little bit about the transferable skills, making sure that the recruiter can see those. And resume clarity, make it simple. Don't put too much information. Have some bullets, work with someone who can put together a well laid out resume. If I can't figure it out, I'm spending maybe 5 to 10 seconds. And if I can't figure out what's going on or where you have stuff, I'm just moving on. So once again, even if you're perfect, if I can't figure it out, I don't have the time or the bandwidth to really spend trying to, decode your resume.
Okay.
Another thing, often people, sometimes when they're having to apply, the company will ask you for what your salary requirement is. And a lot of times hiring managers have given very specific ranges. And if your salary is too high or too low, you're not going to make the cut. So that's a hard one because there's really nothing you can do about it because you may or may not know the salary. But if the salary is posted, please do not go above it. There's a reason that that salary is posted at that level, and you want to give yourself a chance to at least get into the conversation.
Are those, by the way, sorry to interrupt, but
No.
I sometimes see those online posted. I know certain states by law have to post them now. I think we're up to like 23 states or something like that that have to legally post job range. What I'm hearing you say is trust in those numbers when you see them. I've always been kind of curious when I see them, like, is that LinkedIn or Glassdoor or whatever taking their best guess at what the salary range is, or is that really accurate? What would you say to that?
So look at the job post. You can normally tell if it's an embedded salary that was actually put together when the job post was created, or like at the top, sometimes Indeed will just come up with their salary range,
Yeah,
but it won't be part of the actual job description. It's what their best guess is. So, really do your homework, try to find out what the salary range is if it's posted so that you can know if it's something that's feasible for you. Um,
excellent,
I,
perfect.
I like the posting of the salary ranges because it helps people know, yeah, this is the range of where I am or where I want to get to.
Hmm.
It's no fun for anybody if I spend 30 minutes talking to them only to find out that they need almost double what the salary is.
Yeah.
So, it's not a good use of anyone's time. So do
Well,
check
it
that
also
out.
gets us around this awkward dance of the recruiter saying, "What's your salary expectation?" And the candidate like, "Well, what's the salary range?" And like you're playing this like game of poker of who's going to show their cards first kind of thing, which is, as we're working with individuals in their job search, it's always a tough one, is what do you say when the recruiter asks, what are your salary expectations?
And I think giving a range is always a great idea.
Yeah.
You can come in with the range because sometimes if you you might be a little bit higher than their range, but if you can provide a range to them that somewhere hits in theirs, then there's always that chance, 6 months that you could get bumped back up to where you want to be.
Yeah, sure.
You have to show the willingness to potentially take a little step back to get where you want to go.
Or, negotiate some kind of one-time incentive, sign-on bonus,
Extra
relocation, extra
PTO.
PTO. Yeah, anything that may compensate company. I don't think this happens much anymore, but company vehicle or gas card or, something. That, I had somebody once on that level who they were a little bit above the range by about $5,000 but yet they were going to get a company car. And I'm like, and a gas card to pay. I'm like, you're going to save that and not having to buy your own gas anyways, right? Because you're driving the company car in that $5,000. So it's probably a pretty good offer. So yeah, think
Yeah,
about
there's
the
a
other
lot of
thing.
ways to structure the deal as long
Yep,
as you're willing to have a little flexibility.
yep, yep. Very good.
And the last thing I would say, just in general, kind of why you're the perfect candidate, but you weren't chosen. A lot of times people are really overqualified for the job and they're applying for a lower level than their last couple jobs. And it's hard as a recruiter because I always want to give people the benefit of the doubt. Like maybe they've gotten to that point in their career where they just want to take a step back. But 9 times out of 10, as recruiters, we get burned. The person tells us, yeah, 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 I'm good with that. I want to do the
Mm,
tactical again. I'm done with the strategic and the managing of people. And then they show up to talk to the hiring manager, and all of a sudden their salary requirements are sky high, and they basically want to take over and run the whole department.
So why
So
do you think they did that? Why do you think they told you, yeah, I'm looking for a step back, and yet totally bait and switched you in the actual interview?
I think sometimes they just can't help themselves. They get
Okay.
in the interview and they start talking about stuff and what they've done. And I mean, I'm sure there's every once in a while where there truly is someone who's just ready to take that step back.
Yeah.
But
Well,
more
one out
times
of
than
10,
not,
like you said.
yeah, we get burned. So, and then it just makes us
Never
look
know.
bad in front of the hiring managers because they'll be like, didn't you talk about salary? And you're like, yes, I did. I
Yeah.
have the number right here. Well, now they want X. So I think maybe sometimes the thought is they just get the foot in the door and then they impress the hiring manager
And
with
they'll
what they
move the
have to
position
offer.
up
And
and,
yeah,
yeah, doesn't
or
happen though, right?
doesn't always happen that way.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why if you're the perfect candidate, you might not be the perfect candidate because sometimes we're looking for that sweet spot of skills. And if you really have been the department lead or the department head or the vice president, and we're just looking for, the tactical hands-on person, there's a person in place who has the job that you truly want, and
Yeah.
it's just not available right now.
Yeah, because that transition back sometimes, is a lot harder than transitioning up into that role.
Or even people who've owned their own companies being like, yeah, I'm great with being a director. And you're like, okay, but you've run the whole show. Are you really going to be happy? Is this going to be
Yep,
enough challenge for you?
yep,
And those are the questions I always ask people. And I'm asking it because I truly want to know. I want them to tell me, I want them to convince me that they're going to be okay in this role.
yeah.
Because if you've been the leader, sometimes it's hard to go back to just being,
Very hard,
producer.
right? Yeah, it's hard to and break those habits. But something you said a second ago really stuck with me, and kind of being that perfect candidate would made me think is the definition of the perfect candidate is kind of in the eye of the beholder, right? I may think I'm the perfect candidate, but then there's the employer and their version of what the perfect candidate is. And so you have to, and to that end, I'm curious, I'm guessing you're going to say, well, that again is where you really need to digest that job description of what the perfect candidate is. But what would you say to that in terms of how do I level set on not my version of the perfect candidate, but how do I know if I'm their version of the perfect candidate?
So most job descriptions these days literally say at some point, here's what you're going to be doing. These are the
Yeah,
job responsibilities, and they'll list them out. And then at the very end, they'll say requirements, and it'll be everything from education to years of experience to certifications, whatever else they might want to be able to see. And it's really just being honest with yourself, and like, okay, do I check that box? Do I check that box? Do I check that box? And just literally go through. And then, kind of like I mentioned earlier, maybe even tailor your resume to showcase those things up front and center so that the recruiter can see that you do check all the boxes.
so I was going to ask you, and you led right there. So so we've got a resume up here. Just looking at it, we don't have a job description, but is there anything here that you see that may say, oh, this person might have taken this directly from the job description? Where would you look to see that kind of stuff? And if you're advising me on where would I put it in this resume?
So I really like how this resume is laid out. The top section in between the top two green bars, she is highlighting, what she feels like are her true strengths: innovative and leading foundational HR, leading high visibility projects, administering and improving HR technology. So she's kind of laid out for us right then and there what she feels like are her strengths that she brings to the table.
And what you're saying is that may have been in the job description, right? So it may be the perfect candidate has experience leading high visibility projects that optimize employee engagement, right? Or one of the responsibilities or the core job functions may be to improve employee engagement, right? So she's coming right out in front and saying, yep, check it off. Look at
Here's
I've
how I
led
match
some
up.
high visibility. Now, I'm guessing though, if I'm going to say that up there at the top, and nobody can see me pointing, but I'm pointing at the resume I'm looking at here. If I'm reading leading high visibility project, I better have somewhere down below a story of where I've led a high visibility project though, right?
At least a couple times if you're
Okay,
featuring it as one of your top skills. And yeah, don't put fluff at the top that you can't back up, because we're going
yeah,
to figure it out too. We're going to
great
figure it out,
point.
if nothing else, in our conversation. So make sure that what you put on your resume, you can back up and have statistics, have, data that shows, I was able to, 32% ROI, or I was able to decrease turnover by 10%, or whatever your numbers are. But try to find some numbers so it's not just um, sentences and fluff. Like, give me
Yeah.
some concrete stuff that I can really hang on to. The
How do
other
you feel
thing
about, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, the other thing I like about this, the way this resume is set up, she has her signature strengths kind of below her top three things that she's focusing on. And at the end, she includes the different technologies that she knows how to use. She includes that she's bilingual. It's really nice to take a look at that. There's not too many things listed, because some people will list like 25 things. And honestly, I get kind of bored about halfway through and I just kind of scoot on. Sounds terrible, but it's what happens. So make it concise, really focus on the top things you want to talk about. The
It's so
other
funny
great
we're on
thing,
the same page because that was exactly what I was going to ask you about, Diana. What are your thoughts on the signature strengths there? And I love some of the ones you pointed out, right? Like save this section for things that are unique and separate yourself, right? And so
yep,
one, don't put project management on there if the job description doesn't talk about project management at all, because I'm going to get bored and think that you didn't read the job description. But at the same time, what about some other ones where it's like, I've seen ones where they're applying for, a director of finance and they put a signature strength, financial analyst, or, data or financial, um, data and analysis. And I'm thinking, right, I hope so. If you've been in finance and you're applying for a director of finance, I would hope
should be a
financial
given.
analysis is kind of a given. So if you're going to put a signature strength, it really should be signature, right? Like, hey, bilingual is going to show up there, right? Or hey, here are these ATS systems I've worked with, Greenhouse and Taleo. Um,
Exactly.
so that's different, right?
That's different. I want that to be different. I want that signature strength, or whatever you call it, to really showcase something unique about you, not what I'm expecting to see.
Got it. Okay.
And then one more thing to point out about this particular resume, at the very top, she was actually trying to change her career path. So if you can put a cover letter and attach it to your resume, if you can talk to someone that you know that can talk to the recruiter and kind of explain the situation, or in this case, you put it at the very top of the resume. Position to pivot into HR role, leveraging unique skill set. Like, tell me right from the beginning, that your resume is a little bit of a transferable skill switch. You're
Yeah.
trying to get to this new place where you want to be. But I've got to see something on your resume that leads me to believe that that can actually happen, or you've done the basics to get to that area that you want to switch into. But I love that she set it up that way. Like, I am positioned to pivot into this role.
Yeah, and I noticed that too, and it makes sense what you're saying, right? Because if you look down at her professional experience, and if she is applying for an HR professional role or some kind of HR generalist role or something, you would look and say global talent acquisition, senior associate of recruiting. It's like, well, she's been a recruiter,
Mhm.
doesn't make sense. But then, yeah, you're saying she went ahead and called this out up front and then gave examples of where she has done things that the job description calls for. So,
Exactly.
and maybe she also had a cover letter as well when applying for an HR position.
I just think if you're doing anything unique, like if you're venturing into a new area or trying to move up to a new level that I'm not going to see on your resume, anywhere you can put that, like a cover letter or somewhere on your resume. I really liked the position to pivot into. Like she's telling me I'm ready for this. But then once again, I got to see it somewhere or I got to know it somewhere. There's got to be a class that she took. There's got to be a project that she took on somewhere that, has given her the skill set to at least be eligible to be in the conversation.
Okay. What are some other things on here, just looking at her resume that would say, yeah, she checks some other boxes as well too. Maybe not specific to the job description, but just from the resume, what might make her a good candidate that's going to get looked at?
So if you look at under Global Talent Acquisitions Program Associate Manager, she is not just listing what was on her job description. She's literally telling us, I led a 1-year HR project to develop and implement onboarding programs. I manage the HRIS. I create and deliver training programs. And then I'm going to look also at how long she's been at that particular role. So May 23, she probably had been there a year and she was already applying for a new job. So sometimes that raises a flag, sometimes it doesn't. But she had a nice long tenure at the job before that, 2016 to 2023. But then the job before that, she was there for about 6 months. So if I start seeing a pattern of short tenures, it's a flag for recruiters.
Hmm.
We want to see tenure. But I do like how she gave me actual things she did for the most part, and she has percentages in there, 25 less or I'm sorry, under organized and facilitated new hire orientation, it says approximately 25 employees per month. She had new cohorts with a 10-month she really was giving me some meat in there, and I do really appreciate that.
Perfect. Yeah, and like you said, that there are some red flags with short tenured positions, but in this case, who knows? It could be that maybe there was some external circumstances that she was only there for 6 months, and whatnot, right? And so you never know, but yeah, you definitely want to kind of establish that and make sure you've got some traction and longevity in it.
The one thing, Andy, I wanted to add to that,
Yeah,
if you were let go, if your company merged,
yep,
like write that on here somewhere so that I can see. If you were there from 2015 to 2016 and the reason that you had to leave was because the company was purchased, that's not on you. So go ahead and mark that somewhere, spell that out. Or if a company got consolidated, you don't have to have the first company and then the second company listed separately. List them together and then all the jobs underneath. So it creates more longevity for the recruiter to see.
yeah, absolutely. I
But once
like that
again,
point
if
about
you,
it. The jobs are consolidating, right? So it's not two different companies, actually. It's kind of this, you didn't change jobs. It just the companies came together.
yes.
Yeah.
And, however, if there's been 4 layoffs and you are always the one that gets laid off, once again, it's still going to raise a little bit of a flag. But if you
Yep.
could give a little bit more explanation, it's so helpful.
Okay. So then to that end, and this wasn't really on the agenda to talk about today, but you mentioned it, so I'm going to go there. The cover letter. What's your opinion on cover letters these days?
So a lot of times the jobs that I'm hiring for, I will ask for one. It gives me so much information about the person. First of all, how do they communicate? Do they have the attention to detail? Is it grammatically correct? Once again, the format, the content, what they're sharing with me. Are they telling me a story about them that I can relate to and I can see how it would be transferable to this job? It's just a great introduction. I mean, I think of it kind of like an elevator speech. If I got to be on an elevator with someone for 4 or 5 floors, that's their chance to sell me on wanting to have a further conversation with them. So make it good, make it stand out, and read the job description. So you're telling me things that I want to hear about you, and get the company name right. Don't use the same
Mm,
template and accidentally send me one that you meant for another company. Not going to
yeah.
help you.
So write a new one every time.
Write a new one every time. Or if you're able to modify, at least make sure you like go through and proofread it so you capture any errors like that.
Yeah, very good. All
Um,
right, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, if you know anyone at a company, that's a great way too to like send them your cover letter and resume and have them send it to the recruiter. We get that all the time. Somebody calls and says, "Hey, this buddy of mine is really interested. Will you at least take a look?" And depending on the recruiter's time and how well the candidate matches up, we definitely try to do that.
Hmm.
So if there's any connections you have to help you get in, share that information with that person and let them kind of run it up the chain for you.
Yeah, yeah. Funny you say that, right? Because I just did that before we got on the call about a position you're recruiting for. I'm like, oh, I got somebody. I
I
know
got somebody.
can I send them over to you? And you're like, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that goes a long way too. That's that power of that networking.
Exactly.
All right. So we kind of looked at a good resume. Um, Here's one of somebody who's probably thinking they're the perfect candidate. And maybe they are the perfect candidate. Um, but their resume wouldn't suggest that. And so, again, the value of we don't know the person behind this resume, and for all we know, they could be wonderful and they could be the exact ideal candidate, right? But
Exactly.
their first impression isn't going so well for them. So, what things are you looking at here and saying, "Oh boy, like no way."
Okay, so if we look at the summary here versus the previous resume, it's just words.
Yeah.
There's nothing really bolded. There's nothing unique that's making this person stand out in that first section. And then when I go into their actual experience, look at the dates. They've had very short tenures at both of these jobs. And then the listing of things that they're responsible for is just their job description. Manage and facilitate, review and process I-9s, track and maintain record. I mean, this is literally just lifted from their job description.
Yeah. So
I'm
somebody
really
who's a
not,
self-motivated HR professional recognized for strong leadership
I'm
didn't
not getting
describe
any of
anything
that.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not getting any of that below.
Yeah.
So this is not one that I'm going to be excited to spend any time on.
And there's so many bullet points there too, right? Like
A
I get
lot of
tired of reading, right? Help and trouble. I get it down to the bottom. Approve weekly invoices. Like
I don't
that's
want
not
to know that.
something that's spectacular.
Right. I
Yeah,
don't
I
need
don't
to
want.
know that.
Yeah. Okay. So pretty easy to tell. Also a little bit of a job hopper here, maybe too. January
Yeah,
21 to
definitely.
May 22,
And then
May
May
22
22.
present.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that definitely catches our eye. And once again, there's no explanation as to why. Like maybe they moved from city to city, or maybe but you wouldn't go from an HR resources manager backwards to an HR coordinator.
Great
Not
point.
normally a step up title wise. Granted, everybody has different titles, but that's not normally a manager to a coordinator would not be the path that I would want to see them heading in.
Yeah. So a little bit of a red flag there too. Here's something I'm curious about from a formatting standpoint that I don't know if this makes a difference or not, but they spelled out human resources and human resources manager and then did the abbreviation HR coordinator. Big deal or not a big deal?
I'm an I'm an English person by background, so yes, it would bother me. It's not going to be a deal breaker for me, but once again, take the time, have someone else proof your resume, have someone else proof your cover letter, roommate, significant other, whoever, friend, just someone who can look at it and say, "Hey, I noticed that this is different. Did you mean to do it that way?"
Perfect.
Just try to catch the little things because sometimes it does hang people up.
Got it. All right. anything else that we didn't talk about that you think is worth mentioning?
This was maybe just something more when you actually talk to the recruiter, but it's
Okay.
something I've been thinking about based on our conversations, Andy. If, let's say, you had an employer and things didn't go well, maybe they weren't the greatest company in the world, maybe things happened that weren't very ethical, don't badmouth the company, the employer, the boss to the recruiter. You never know who knows who. And it just, nobody wants to hire someone who's disgruntled, unhappy, still working through a bad situation. So you could just very politely say, we had a difference of opinion and, I'm no longer at that company, and just leave it at that. I can read between the lines, but I want you to be positive and not like, oh God, okay, let me tell you about this story and this boss. And oh my God, can you believe I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hire someone who comes in with baggage. I don't want to hire someone who I think is not going to get along with other people. So just tell me there was a difference of opinion. Tell me there was a change in management, something nice and generic, and don't badmouth your previous employer.
It's from a personal level, it's something I always talk about, even with my two boys as well too. Just always take the high road on
Take
things.
the high
No matter
road.
how much you want to, it will help you more in the long run, and it's just things that people don't need to know. So especially the case in it could, and I'm sure, look, if things didn't end well, you probably do have a lot of emotion and feelings about that, and that's okay. But right time, right place, and this is not that right time or that right place when talking with a recruiter, and that's why when we're coaching individuals at LAK Group, we do something that we call the reason for leaving statement. So one of the first things we do with everybody, just even to help from a recovery standpoint of, right, you just had this traumatic experience of going through job loss. Um, let's work on how you want to message that, not only to recruiters, but just in general, because it's a bit, let's get it out and now let's figure out how we're going to message it going forward. So it may not be recruiters, it may be you just happen to bump into somebody at a birthday party, right? Who could be a potential employer. And if you're speaking badly about your former employer, that they're not going to be one to advocate for you, right? Going back to what you said, passing along those resumes and saying, hey, I got somebody you need to talk to.
Right.
That it goes beyond just the recruiter as well, too, with bad mouthing your former employer.
Yeah, and just have a statement, like work with Andy or one of the coaches and figure out what your statement is,
Yep.
just make it acknowledge what happened and move forward with it.
Yep.
Whatever it may be, maybe there's something you learned, that's fine to share with me, but just don't badmouth people.
You got it. It's the old adage, it's not personal, it's business.
It's business. There's a time
Business.
and a place. Know your audience.
You got it. Well, I really appreciate your time again, Diane. As usual, you've given some great insight and advice. And like I always say, it's one thing to hear from us as the coaches who are coaching individuals, but it's a totally different thing to hear it right out of the source's mouth, the recruiter who is looking at this stuff. And it's a bit of validation, right? So, we're coaching individuals on it, and we know what we're talking about. But at the same time, it's also helpful validation to say, we do know what we're talking about. So thank you for helping me out with this. And I think everybody's going to really enjoy hearing what you've shared.
Well, thank you, Andy. I loved being part of this, and I loved giving some tiny little glimmers of how to be successful and pass it on.
Awesome. Thanks, Diana.